Dave Cooper Live. We connect the industry leaders in the architectural, engineering, and construction space with the people, the products, and the processes to help them build it better. Welcome, everybody, to Dave Cooper Live. As the winds continue to deliver a particularly dangerous situation in California, and wildfires and other natural disasters are hitting our country and around the world, today we welcome one of California's leading experts in wildfire safety to Dave Cooper Live, part of a special series focused on building with resilience. Please welcome to the show David Hsu, former CAL FI staff chief and licensed architect, who says fires are not a forestry problem. They are a structure ignition problem. And we're going to explore the immediate crisis and what you can do right now to safeguard your home, how new technology helps mitigate risk, evidence-based solutions for communities building and living in fire-prone regions, helping break the fire's path and build with resilience. However, we can't do any or all of this without our supporting members, and today's show is powered by Cobalt Creed. They are a cutting-edge small duct energy efficiency central HVAC solution for homes and businesses where space is at a premium. Whether you're looking to optimize comfort or energy efficiency, Cobalt Creed has the expertise to make it happen. Visit them at cobaltcreed.com. And may I have a few words with these supporting members as well? Make sure you reach out and thank them for all this important information we bring you each and every day. CombiLift is the largest global manufacturer of multi-directional forklifts and straddle carriers, a leader in long load handling solutions, offering a free warehouse and site optimization design service. CombiLift helps companies of all sizes and from every industry maximize the capacity, safety, and efficiency of their warehouse and storage facilities. A big thank you to Paul Short and the team at CombiLift for helping us all to build it better. Visit them at combilift.com. Ready to scale up your offsite construction business? Introducing 4A Constructs, your solution to finding skilled labor for offsite manufacturing. Say goodbye to the headache of recruiting a skilled workforce with hand-selected certified tradesmen that are expertly trained and managed for offsite manufacturing, set crews, and finish crews, ensuring maximum productivity and safety. Unlock the future of skilled workforce development for all of your offsite construction needs. Visit them at 4aconstructs.com. All right. Again, thank you to all those supporting members, to include all of the supporting members you're seeing in our ticker on the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to have your name there, just let us know. We'd love to give you a shout out, and we'd love to thank you for supporting our show each and every week. All right. Without further ado, let's bring David Hsu on. David, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, man, I know you are busy. I know California is all over the news each and every day now for the last week, 2 weeks. So first of all, our hearts and prayers go out to you and all your Californians, I guess is what we call them. But man, I can't tell you how devastating this is, but how excited I am to have you taking the time to come on this show so we can help people out there. But before we get into it, David, we want to know everything about you before the moment you were born to this very moment in time. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital. We're going to have family member on. And I heard they can be a little bit tricky with you, so I get it all out, but you only have a minute and a half to do it. And then we're going to get into how we can help other people make the right decisions moving forward. Go for it.
Thanks a lot. That's a lot to put in a minute and a half, but I grew up on a farm in Indiana, West Central Indiana by Illinois, and all I ever wanted to do was to be an architect. And so I went to school at the University of Cincinnati, got my architectural degree, started working in California, primarily Southern California, and learning the trade. Building, construction, designing, materials, all those things. Moved up to Northern California to work with another architect who happened to be the volunteer fire chief at the small community I moved up to work at. And that led me into a 32-year career of firefighting with CAL FIRE. I retired in 2018 from that job and started doing consulting work. As you know, probably a lot of your listeners know, we started having the big fire sieges in 2017 and 18. And I retired and started doing consulting on how to continue to build a more resilient future and prevent these kinds of disasters from happening to our built environment. I did a lot of consulting with insurance companies and communities all over the Western United States that were essentially asking, could those kinds of disasters happen here? And the answer, quite frankly, is nothing but yes in almost all cases. So that brought me to a job that was offered to me here where I live in Napa, California, as the county fire administrator. And pretty simply, my job here is to try to figure out how to have a more fire resilient future for us here in Napa. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. But I still reach out and work with a lot of companies on fire resiliency.
I bet you do. So before we get into it, I think we need to give a big shout out and thank you and all your service to California and the country as a firefighter and somebody working to protect everybody, but also all of these firefighters out there. This is hard work. It's hot work. And this is bigger than most anybody's ever seen. So a big thank you and prayers go out to all of them as well. So, all right. David, give us a quick update. What's happening on the ground right now? I'm sure you're in a ton of meetings. Give us a little bit of behind the scenes of what's going on, and are they making any progress?
They have been making a lot of progress over the last few days for the very simple fact that Mother Nature's begun to cooperate a lot more. We had those horrific winds those first few days that we saw, which was the reason why these fires don't get put out by human beings.
Right.
When you're facing category 2, 3, 4 hurricane style winds that are blowing fire everywhere, we don't have any resources in our human toolbox to be able to put those kinds of fires out. And unfortunately, most of the structures that exist out there in the built environment today were never designed or intended to try to resist these kinds of impacts. So they become very vulnerable and a lot of them ignite, and which is what we saw last week. However, the winds did die down at the end of this past week, and we were very lucky to see a lot of firefighters have a lot of good work and made a lot of good progress. So we've seen those containment numbers continue to go up. The unfortunate part of this is that those winds are predicted to be coming back in here, up here where I live in Napa. The winds are really beginning to pick up again a little bit this morning here. That is the prediction. We're going to see more winds down there this week. And that's not good news when those winds can pick those embers up and start new fires. So we're going to be watching that very closely.
How far is Napa from LA and where these fires are? Are you guys out of the danger zone?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're quite a few hours away, several hundred miles north. Of course, San Francisco, I'm north of San Francisco, so it's quite a far ways away from the Los Angeles fire. So we're not in any threat from these particularly, but we've had similar events happen here, right here in Napa County, Sonoma County, and the North Bay area.
You've had 3 decades, right, of frontline firefighting, fire prevention experience. How does this particular event compare to what you've seen in the past, and what can we expect in the future? Has it ever been this bad?
Yes, it has been this bad. I think we're seeing a lot of media coverage of this. I would say there's a part of it has to do with the location. It is affecting a very famous part of the world. And so it does get a lot more attention. But quite frankly, these types of fires and what is happening to the built environment surrounding it is not unheard of. And we have seen these types of fires before. If you go back to 1991, we had a fire in the Oakland Hills that's the tunnel fire, and that destroyed over 3,000 structures in just a few hours. So we've witnessed these types of fires before. This one is particularly bad because of the
Yeah.
number of fires and the areas that it's covered. But I think that the unfortunate part of this, to the simple answer to your question, is that no, this is unfortunately not an anomaly anymore. We're seeing these types of events more and more frequently now.
So you have an architectural background in this, and this is where I really want to get into, all of your knowledge and what we're going to do here. But help me understand when you say we have a structure ignition problem, what does that actually mean? Like, I mean, houses are built with wood. Of course they're going to burn.
Well, of course they can burn. They don't have to, and
True.
we'll get into that in a little bit. And I do wish that I could claim credit for creating that phrase. The structure ignition problem was coined by a research scientist with the U.S. Forest Service named Jack Cohen, and he's a brilliant researcher who first brought up this notion that wildfires are primarily thought of as a forestry problem. There are fires that are burning in our wildland areas, in our forests. But now we're beginning to see these fires encroach upon areas where we've built homes and subdivisions and entire communities. And so now we're seeing lots of impacts in our built environment and these communities all over the world, quite frankly.
Right. So what do we do about it? That's kind of the question, right? So
Yeah.
you're on the staff. I mean, you spend your whole life trying to figure this out. What do you think the next steps are here? What are we going to learn from this? Do you think we're finally going to get the hint that we need to do some better things? And then I want to get into like, where how is this spreading so fast? We get the winds happening, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, most people would say it's the materials around your house that are a problem, or is it?
Yeah. Well, no, that's exactly right. The winds are the items that you have around your home, on your home, are very, very definitely the problem. Those are probably the key elements that can either make or break whether your home might ignite from a fire or
Right.
not. I think that we need to kind of separate this into two buckets. First of all, there is all the built environment that exists out there in the landscape. So we have built towns, communities, subdivisions, all of these things for decades, if not centuries, in areas that are highly prone to wildfires. Southern California is no stranger to wildfires. Wildfires have been part of the natural ecosystem in this part of the world for millenniums. It's not unusual. We've seen them. There's records of them going back as far as records exist. And so it's not new. The new part is the intensity and the frequency that they're happening and the impact that they're having on the environment where we have built. So there's two things at play here. We have the existing structures and communities that we need to talk about. How do we make them more resilient when fire events like this occur and start threatening them? The other part of it is new construction. So as we begin to think of not only rebuilding in areas that have already burned, but really thinking about if we're going to build new any place on the planet, how do we think about that in a better way with using fire as a touchstone and being able to think, how do we build it so that if a fire does impact this community in the future, we have a much better chance of survival? And so I want to think about it in those two manners. Building new today because
Mhm.
of the technology and what we've learned from these types of events, allow us to build a highly fire resilient structure and community that we've never had before. But we have to make the right choices. There have to be the right materials and land use planning decisions made as to where to build, how to cluster structures so that they minimize the impact of a potential fire in the future.
Right.
So we need to be very methodic about thinking about those decisions and how we do it correctly.
So tell me a little bit about, let's dive into this. Let's start off with the role of technology today, AI, predictive modeling, et cetera. Where does one begin, as a building industry expert, somebody that's been a builder, a developer, where does this begin? Does it begin with technology? Does it begin with predictive modeling? Like, this is a big education thing. There's a lot of houses that need rebuilt. This is massive.
It is a big education thing, and I'm glad you brought that up because people need to understand the fact that there are newer ideas available to us today, new construction materials and panels. We're going to talk about one of the companies I've involved with of RSG 3D, which builds a fire resilient construction panel and energy efficient panel. But that's not the only solution, because we need to think about how do we understand fire and how fire and embers primarily impact existing structures, and how we can prevent those embers from igniting our structures. A lot of the photographs that you're showing, and everybody saw on TV, those massive
Right.
blowing embers, millions, if not billions or trillions of embers that are blowing around. And what we do know today, I'm going to say, if there's any silver lining to all of this, it is the fact that it's providing us with a very fertile laboratory from which we can learn how to do better the next time. And we are doing that. We're learning the impacts of these kind of things. We're going to the structures that have survived in the middle of these horrific fires and really trying to study, how did this structure survive and why didn't the other neighbors survive as well? And so what we know today is that approximately 90%, or maybe even more in some cases, of every structure that ignites in a wildfire today are primarily related to those embers. Those embers can find vulnerable cracks or crevices to invade a structure and actually find an ignition point on the combustible material that structure was built out of. And once that happens, the winds will cause that structure to burn, and there's very little. One of the sobering statistics is that through all these fires that we've collected data from for about the last 10 years, if a structure does ignite from those embers, there's less than a 7 or 8% chance that it will be survived at all. It'll be saved at all. So if we know that most of the structures are igniting from those embers, and we know that once it ignites, there's very little chance of survival, we really need to focus on how to prevent structures from igniting from those embers to begin with. And it goes back to your point you brought up earlier. It's the little things. It's the things right against your house. It's the materials you're using. All of those decisions and choices will make a difference in the future fires.
It definitely will. Before the show, we were talking about some of these miracle houses, right? This is an example where everything around it burned, but this structure. We don't know the reason why yet, right? Obviously, there's something different about this structure versus the structures that were around it. So, from a building science perspective, how do we keep the fires out? How do we build houses that don't have ridge vents and venting that pulls the embers into the attic and all those things? What is the way forward?
Well, certainly the vents are one of the primary reasons that embers have intruded into crawl spaces and attics and concealed spaces of all kinds, underneath decks, all kinds of things that make it vulnerable to ignitions. Right. So one of the things we need to do is, how do we prevent those embers from ever getting into the house to begin with? So they make some very good materials today that are highly effective in keeping the vast majority of embers out of homes today. And underneath decks, all these kind of things that we have the ability and capacity to know. There's another material I'll give a pitch to, the Ember Defense Mesh, which is a product from a company out of Australia. As we all know, Australia has a pretty good fire problem. And
Right.
so what we're looking at is learning from techniques all over the world to help prevent those structures from igniting. But embers going into crawl spaces are only one thing. If you have kindling, I'm going to use the word kindling, and that kindling is going to refer to any kind of combustible vegetation, your simple landscaping that you have right up against your house, and that you've then protected that and made it safe with bark mulch to conceal moisture and keep the weeds down and all those kind of things. That bark mulch, especially in the weather conditions that are very dry, very hot, very windy, those are simply nothing more than individual pieces of kindling that will ignite very, very easily and then ignite the structure. We see that over and over again. So once again, if you live at a house where you have bark mulch protecting your landscaping right up against your house, I would say that one of the very first things you need to do is reconsider how to put a different type of landscaping, and certainly remove the bark mulch from ever coming up to the house. You can have
Right.
it nearby within 4 to 5 feet, but you definitely don't want anything to touch the house. The mantra today is what we call the zero zone around the house, which is think of it about a 5-foot moat all the way around the perimeter of your entire house. And the hope is that we can get most people to remove all, if not most of anything combustible within that 5-foot zone. If you've removed anything that can ignite from those embers from that zone around your structure, you've now significantly reduced the risk of that house igniting to begin with, because there's nothing there for it to ignite.
So, but I mean, you still can have plants. You can still do all these things. You just have to
Of
be a little
course,
bit more tidy about what you do. Is it the same for forest management in California?
it has a similar feel to it. In the
Yeah.
forested world, obviously, density and you have to. I'm not going to get into lots of fire behavior
Right.
details and things like this.
Yeah.
Everybody will go to sleep, but what happens is that you have to kind of understand that fuel density. And when I say fuel, that is anything that a fire will burn. And as we've seen today, it's pretty much everything, whether it's
Right.
structures, vehicles, communities, those kind of things. If we have more space between elements that will burn, then fire has to expend a lot more energy jumping and going from one thing that's burning to another. And the more space that we have, if a fire is coming towards your home, your property, or your community, if you make it more and more difficult for the fire to get there, and what we call it, what I'm referring to is the path that fire will take.
Right.
One of the things to think of is that fire is a really lazy element. It wants to take the path of least resistance. So another element that we see that is a very common denominator of structure ignitions are wood fences. And guess what? We see wood fences everywhere.
Sure.
Quite frankly, I'm guilty of it. I have a wood fence around my house. And so if that wood fence were to ignite, that wood is simply going to carry the fire right up to your house. And so
Right.
it's kind of like the bark mulch. If you have a gap or a break from that wood fence and it hits something that's non-combustible, whether it's metal or concrete, something that is not going to burn, then the fire breaks the path and there's nothing for the fire to reach your house. That's kind of the thought process we need to go to. But
Right.
of course, that doesn't solve the embers from blowing. And so we need to think about your home surviving that firestorm of embers that are just going to bombard your house, and make sure that we haven't allowed for there to be joints and cracks and areas where those firebrands can swirl around and ignite debris on your roof, on your decks, all of those kind of things. So we need to make sure that we are taking care of all of those areas, and don't allow the fire to start around your house to begin with.
So the fires around the house are one thing, right? It makes sense, right? Don't have fire and kindling sitting everywhere around your house like a wood picket
Right.
fence. And it goes against everything we're taught as American. I want a beautiful house with a white picket fence, right? It's been the saying forever and a day. Let's talk about homeowners. how do they know what to ask for? And I'm going to put this, you said RSG3, and I know Ken and the team over there. So I'm really happy you're part of what they're doing, because their product is one of many resources that people can look at. But this fits into what you're saying, right? There's the ambers and the wood and the kindling that's around the house, but there's also materials that we can build with our house, like the Miracle House we showed earlier that didn't burn. Something happened there that they used something that was safer. So I'm going to add this to the screen and walk us through, how do homeowners know what to look for or what to ask for?
I think we need to be researching products like this that don't have the combustible properties that will allow the fire to ignite the house to begin with. When I'm sitting here talking about that Ember Storm, this product, once it's built and in place, Ember Storms can bombard it all day long, and there's just nothing there to burn. So they have a very high success rate of being able to survive. And so that's exactly what we're seeing. People reach a point where they are tired of seeing neighborhoods being taken down. There's unfortunately people who've lost homes more than once to fires in their area, and they simply basically say, how do I rebuild again? But this time in a way that I know the fire isn't going to take out my house the next time.
Right.
And so when we start asking those kinds of questions, products like RSG, the panel that, and you can see here sort of a blowtorch situation affecting the exterior wall, and you'll notice that nothing will happen. It'll kind of put some blackened char on the outside of it, but it certainly isn't going to burn anything on the inside. So it's going to survive a firestorm affecting it. So we really need to kind of think differently about how we build new. And quite frankly, here in Northern California, where we've had a lot of devastating fires over the past 6 to 7 years, a lot of people have discovered this product and others to be able to rebuild in a way that makes their home really, really almost next to impossible to burn down in the next firestorm. That's a fairly controversial question, because a lot of people don't know about these things and say, again, throw their arms up and say, I don't believe that. How could anything survive these horrific winds and horrible firestorms that we're seeing developing when these fires occur? But that's the whole thing. You brought it up yourself. People exist in a paradigm of what they know and what they've seen and what they've experienced literally for hundreds of years. It's all we know. And so I would suggest that there is a need for us to kind of break out of that paradigm and stop continuing to do the same thing we've always done, and start looking at different ways of doing things that will make it not only less vulnerable to any type of disaster, whether it's hurricanes or tornadoes, these winds that are blowing, fires, all these kind of things, earthquakes, but also make it very energy efficient, which is a huge element that we have to capture as we move forward. So these structures are not only disaster resilient, but also extremely energy efficient. So when you're looking at options to build something different from the way we've built before, this is a highly successful and affordable product that people can use today.
As you've been out there, and RSG3 is just one of them, right? And you mentioned, that you sit on the board now of this company, and I'm assuming there's a reason for that. But they're not the only company. There's options out there, and this is just one prime example of what can be used. And this product, I've seen it. I know the folks over there can be used for residential, commercial. It could rebuild the Hollywood mansions, all of those things because of what it can do. I think it can span. If I'm right, I think it was a span of like 40 feet or something with no structural load to blow, like if you're doing, second floor decks and stuff. So it's a cool product. But how do people find this stuff? Where do they learn about this? Because, this is the offsite industry. This is better ways to build. And it's not like we're mainstream knowledge out there for everybody to figure this out.
Yeah, I was in the same boat looking at these kind of things when I first became aware of this product.
Hmm.
I was highly skeptical. I mean,
Yep.
we've pointed out my background in architecture, my 30 plus year career in the fire service, even ended up working at the state fire marshal's office in California, where I was in charge of statewide programs for fire prevention. And I had never seen or heard of this product before. And I was
Hmm.
skeptical too. I thought, no, nobody has anything that can withstand these fires. But I learned otherwise. After I finally started doing my research and looking at the product, it really convinced me that yes, this is a product that can do those things. But people need to understand that it's not all lost. That people can actually see these products and whether it is a simple ADU and an assisted dwelling unit in your backyard or on other places or condominiums or commercial structures. These things, yeah, there's an example of a house right there that you see that was in what was called the Valley
Yeah.
Fire in Lake
Right.
County. And that house survived. You can see the terrain, the vegetation around it,
Sure.
and no other houses surviving as far as you can see. But that house survived this product. This is another house that was destroyed in Santa Barbara from a fire and now being rebuilt with this panel so that it doesn't burn down again. So, yes, we do have knowledge that these things will work and they bring you a hugely energy efficiency with them.
Right.
So it's very successful. But again, this is for new construction, and these are ideas that people can use for new construction. You're not going to employ that type of a panel in an existing situation and try to retrofit your home with that. So you have to go to other alternatives, such as the vents and changing your landscaping, looking
Right.
at your deck. What furniture and combustible materials do you have on your deck right next to your house or under your eaves?
Yeah.
And so there's lots of things that they can look at, and there's lots of resources, whether it's your local fire department, fire marshal's office, a company called the IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business
Hmm.
and Home Safety, have created an entire website called Wildfire Prepared Home, which gives you some really great tools and ideas about how to make your home more fire resilient. Um, NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, has some great links on their website to keep your home more fire safe and
Right.
build a neighborhood with a Firewise commitment of neighbors coming together and trying to work together as a neighborhood to make their homes more fire resilient.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't happen with one home.
Yeah, we've
Uh,
heard
you,
plenty of stories on the news about neighbors helping each other, and they were able
that's
to
right.
stop the fire on some of these. Let me ask you this: there's fire protective, there's fire resistant, there's fire retardant, there's fireproof, there's non-combustible, right? I mean, like it's kind of like our industry of offsite construction. There's offsite construction, there's modular, there's all these nomenclatures, right?
It's a little
Which
confusing.
it is, and each one of those fire protective has something to offer different than fire resistant, and they probably should be used in different places within the structure or around the structure. Can you break it down? Just give us the quick overrun of what these terminologies are.
Yeah, so I think you hear the word I think most commonly used these days as fire resilient.
Yeah.
And what that is trying to imply is the fact that structures are highly resistant to any kind of ignition, whether it is from those embers, whether it is from direct flame hitting them, or whether it's from radiant heat of a large fire nearby, such as a neighbor's house or a forested area that's the vegetation hasn't been cleared.
Right.
So, really, those are the only three ways that a structure is going to ignite in a wildfire: either the embers, direct flame, or radiant heat. But embers, as we know and we mentioned, are the most common cause. So, but we have to prevent these ignitions on all three levels of those
Hmm.
things. So, making a structure resistant from all of those areas mean that you've built with the right materials, with the right details, and the right defensible space around it. It's a package deal. You don't get to just say, if I just do
Right.
this, then I'll be okay. You may have reduced the risk somewhat, but there's still other risks that remain.
Yeah.
So One of the things that I think all your listeners should know is that we don't know everything yet. I wish there were a magic list that I could go to your particular property, maybe your existing house, or meet with you discussing how to build a new home and check the boxes and say, do these things and you'll be fine. The fact is that we say, if you do these things, you've now reduced the risk of your house being destroyed uh, by a lot in the future, but we don't know enough to be able to say, do these things, and I can give you a 100% guarantee that your house will survive. We're just simply not there yet. We don't know
100%.
enough.
Come on.
Well, I hope to
I'm
get
looking
there
for it.
someday.
I'm
We're
looking for it.
working on it. We're working on it, but we're not there yet. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have to go with what we know. And so what I'm sharing with you, all these things are, are the things that we know today. And that's
Right.
what we're trying to do, is to focus on, yep, there's the Wildfire Prepared Home website from IBHS. So there's a lot of good resources that people can use. But we also need to be cautious of people using techniques. And of course, there's a lot of people. And as we mentioned earlier, my decision to work primarily with RSG is because there's other products out there, but I don't think any of them are quite as good. I guess
Right.
I can say that. But the fact is that there are other products, but this is the gold standard pretty much. And I also want to say that there's a lot of techniques and things that we hear a lot about sprinkler systems, and that kind of tied into a lot of the narrative
Mhm.
of the hydrant pressure running out in Los Angeles during these fires and things like that. Well, imagine if your house had sprinklers on it and you were relying only on those sprinklers to keep your house from burning down. Well, once that pressure goes away, if you don't have a dedicated source of water to continue working the water through those sprinklers on your own,
Yeah.
then the water system doesn't do any good. And quite frankly, when we have winds that are 60, 70, 80, even up to 100 miles an hour, you can only imagine what the water does once it
Yeah.
comes out of that sprinkler head. The water's probably not going to go where you wanted it to go. And so there's a lot that we still don't know yet about making sprinklers successful. Now, I don't want to give people the impression that they don't work. We can go to lots of examples where we've seen sprinklers be very
Right.
successful, but we've also seen them fail. And so, once again, we don't know enough yet to say, do this, and we can guarantee with 100% certainty that your house will survive. We're just not there yet.
But let's talk about the government. Let's talk about city officials, housing authorities. What is it do they need to know? Are there technologies they should be using, or who should they be speaking to? Or is it all the same names and websites that you mentioned? Maybe I should throw my name in the hat because I seem to know a lot of these resilient products that are out there around the world. But what do they need to know? What are you going to tell 'em? What are you going to tell like government, Newsom or any of these people where they're politicians? And we don't get into politics on this, but they still have to be part of the solution. How do they help?
So I think that what we have to do is break away from the easy step of simply moving forward very quickly and uh, essentially replacing everything we did the exact same way and expecting a different result next time, because we all know that that is not going to happen. So, one of the things I'd like to share is I'll bring up the clearest example. We know today that that 0 to 5 foot zone, the zero zone around a house, can play enormous benefits and help reduce the risk of your structure igniting, especially from those embers, by a lot. Yet that is not a required ordinance in most jurisdictions. In fact, the state of California has not enacted it in part of our statewide fire safety regulations yet. They're discussing it, they're trying to figure out the exact wording and how that will play out. But at the end of the day, the state has even found it so difficult to find the exact wording to put that in our public safety regulations that we don't have it yet. Now, there have been some local jurisdictions who've placed some similar and effective regulations in place, but until politicians start listening to the science and
Yeah.
research and start requiring those elements that we know will help resist ignitions in the future,
Yeah.
and not listen to the special interest of the building and contractor world saying, oh, don't do that because it's too expensive, which a lot of times translates into don't do that because I don't understand it and it will cost money for me to learn it
Right.
and redo it. So I think that we have to have, it's a combination of both the public understanding, being patient, but the building community as a whole and the fire service really understanding that let's pivot towards these new materials, these new ideas, land use planning regulations, and these are very, very difficult conversations.
Right.
And those conversations will take place in Los Angeles. They already are starting, and they're not going to be easy. They're going to be very difficult because you've got thousands of people who just lost their homes.
Right.
And the first thing you want to do is try to let people get back to their homes. But we need to do it in a way that is smart and a way that is resilient. So the next time, and it's not if, it's when the next fire burns through that area, we don't see these same results again.
So from a planning perspective, and technology wise, and then I'm going to get into building code for a quick second, but we're getting a little close on time here. Are they using technology for planning models now, right? When these fires spread, people were stuck in the streets. They couldn't get out because it was moving so fast, right? Do you see them using more technology to work on evacuation routes, to predict the speed of these fires? Can they use land data and things like that to understand where's the hot spots for these fires, where they're going to pick up and move? I mean, what can they do different?
Yeah, and that technology is increasing as we speak. As we all know, information.
I bet everybody's on it right now.
Well, there's a lot of people studying it right now. You're
Yeah.
exactly right. And so, yes, those understandings of how fire is going to move, the predictive fire models that are being used and that have already existed out there for a few years, coupling them into models of evacuation planning. There's a company called Ladris Technologies that is beginning to introduce some very sophisticated evacuation modeling that incorporates timed evacuation. It's not that we just are saying, here's areas that need to be evacuated, go. It actually is looking in real time and being able to give you time frames and stamps. And if a route becomes blocked because the fire moves or a tree goes down or something happens that makes that evacuation route ineffective, it can immediately pivot and redirect people to a different way to get them out safely. So there's a lot of new technology that is coming available to us now. And it's a matter of incorporating that new technology. But once again, I'm going to say a statement that I am guilty of too. We're all human beings, right? And so change is really hard for some people.
Yeah.
And so looking at new technology, new ways of doing things and such can be very, very difficult and unnerving for a lot of people because they don't understand it. They're not, used to it. It's something they have to learn. And from a business perspective, that costs money. And so how do you factor that change in? But is it worth the effort and the cost of going ahead and looking at things differently, of investing the time and money into doing it smarter so that the resulting losses of future events are much, much less? I think, the evidence is very, very clear. And this is true from whether I'm talking about fires or earthquakes or hurricanes or whatever the case may be. Dollars spent in doing things smarter, in a preventative mode, save enormous amounts of money down the road from recovery and rebuilding costs later. And we know that those factors are indisputable. How many dollars they save are up for debate, depending on where and what the emergency is. But we know unequivocally on every case that dollars can be saved down the road if we invest the dollars now into building smarter.
I agree with that 100%. And I will tell you, this is where I do think, artificial intelligence and AI will start playing a bigger role to helping people
Yes.
figure it out. But also I completely understand the lack of understanding, right? And not understanding the models like RSG3, because even offsite construction, modular, right? It's equated to something that's completely different than what it truly is. And as soon as you get somebody to a factory and they're like, holy cow, I had no idea. Well, I know this is what happens, right? I'm sure it's the same with RSG3 and their panels and others, right? When people actually see it and you see it not burning, then people go, oh, all right, maybe I should look at it. It'll save us time. It'll save us money in the future. There's a cost to everything, but understanding that cost isn't always upfront. It's what that cost saves you when something like this happens. And when you have to rebuild and all these people we got to help support and take care of. So you work as an advisor with the Wildfire Defense Works as well, advising insurance companies, communities, homeowners. Tell us a little bit more. Is there a risk of the insurance companies pulling out of California? Have they had enough between earthquakes and all the, I mean, this is a major fire. This could sink some of these insurance companies.
Well, you're right. And the insurance companies are looking at this very closely, of course. But quite frankly, the reality of insurance companies either leaving outright or choosing not to write new policies or
Right.
reducing the number of policies they have, that's actually been going on for quite a few years here. And the same thing is happening in Florida with the risk of hurricanes and things like that. So the insurance industry is being challenged quite bluntly with all of these types of disasters. And so, once again, making sure that we're rebuilding or retrofitting existing structures to make them highly resilient and resistant from those kind of impacts from these natural disasters is absolutely
Yeah.
critical. And you won't find an insurance company out there that won't agree with that statement. If they are going to be looking at risk to insure, if you've taken the steps to really reduce that risk and make sure that the next time that event comes through, that natural disaster, but the likelihood of total destruction or anything is very low, that's a good risk to
Right.
take. And so I would argue that these kinds of resilient features and the cost value of building in these types of structures that also play an energy efficient role, which reduce energy costs and dollars out of your pocket for the long term. Um, all of those things are going to be playing into our future roles of how to make things more resilient in the future,
Right.
but also how to save money and reduce the risk that insurers are looking at and make it more palatable for them to go ahead and continue to do business here.
So reduce your risk and you'll help reduce the insurer's risk, which will hopefully lower your costs and make it more likely that they'll insure what you're building moving forward, or at least supplement what you're building. That's what I'm hearing.
That's
David,
all
is
we
there,
have to do.
that's it, right?
That's it.
Now we only have tens of thousands of structures to do it for, but it's got to start somewhere. Um, I got two things before we wrap up. The first one is building codes in California. I saw something come out saying, hey, they're relaxing a lot of these codes so people can begin rebuilding right away. And I go, huh, well, did we need those codes to begin with? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, what are you relaxing? You're just making it easier. We don't have to review it now. We don't have to charge you $50 here and $200 here and has to go to that private, resource to review. Have you heard anything on this? Let us know. Like, it just mind
Sure.
boggles me that they dropped the standard like that.
I think that, and I have not seen a list from Los Angeles of anything saying this is what we're going to change to allow
Right.
people to come back in and get renewed. My experience in fires that we've experienced here locally is that jurisdictions put in place avenues for people to do it faster and more efficient.
Yep.
Those also cost money. Being able to have jurisdictions ramp up for these kinds of big losses. Suddenly, if
Yeah.
you're used to maybe a couple of hundred permits per year and now you're looking at thousands, something has to change or
Sure.
you can't get the work done. So I don't know exactly what permits or building codes that they're talking about, you know, making easier.
Right.
Certainly, we're going to keep the life safety features that we know save lives. Those are going to be kept intact. We're not
Yeah.
going to change those. We don't want to put people's lives at risk.
Good.
And so I think there will be other things that they look at, but quite frankly, I have not seen any kind of a list of things that they'll relax that will jeopardize anybody's future life safety. What I would say is that, of course, California has the best fire safety regulations possibly in the world, but certainly in this country. And so we want to make sure there's going to be a lot of discussion about do we enforce those fully to make sure that every structure gets rebuilt in a fire resilient manner using in the California, it's called Chapter 7A. That's been built into the international codes of our, building construction methodologies of our Wildland Urban Interface Code, which is available to any state anywhere in the country. And I do know that there's other states looking at that entire code outright, or at least versions of it. And so other states are recognizing all over the Western United States, but let's figure in. We just this fall, we had a lot of fire impacts in New Jersey that even burned over into Long Island. The fire back in 2016 in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So these things are not, anomaly just to the West Coast. These are happening all over our country. And frankly, all over the world, Asia, South America, Australia, Africa. We see these kinds of events occurring everywhere. And so we have to really look at this as a global issue.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn from everybody. Well, I'll tell you what, if they speed up the process, I hope it's kind of like grocery prices in this country. Once it gets to that level, they don't go back, right? The prices always stay where they are. So I hope the speed to get permits, like they're stuck now, right? People are going to expect it. So good. David, is there anything that we didn't discuss, anything that you want to put out there before we wrap up today?
I'm sure there's a lot of things that I'll think about after we log off here. But I think I want to give people hope. I want to let people know that don't just focus on what you're seeing on TV of the endless coverage of the burned out communities and things like that. I really want people to understand that there are things that you can do at your own house, on your property, and in your neighborhood that can help avert these kinds of disasters in the future. Don't just take it for granted that there's nothing you can do. That's not true. So I really want people to think that they can do something proactive and possibly help prevent this from their own homes in the future.
Well, I agree with you, and thank you so much for coming on today, David. I know that you have so much more knowledge in there, and you probably could have gone for 8 hours with me on this show, right?
I could.
On what's happening, and for people out there, get involved as well. There's a lot of community outreach that's happening. There's a lot of the Red Cross, I'm sure, and everybody else. There's a lot of people in need. So I had somebody say to me once when we were doing some veteran stuff, and I said, "Well, how do we get involved?" And he looked at me and he goes, "Just get involved. It's that simple." Just get involved. So again, thank you to all the incredible fire professionals that are out there. And this is an open call as well for homeowners, developers, builders, communities, government officials. If you're ready to build with resilience, drop a note in the comments. Let us help you. We know everybody. We know RSG3. We've done 3,000 interviews plus around the world. Let Dave Cooper Alive help you figure this out. We're here to help. We're here to share the knowledge, spread the word, and promote people like David Shu and RSG3 so you know that there are better products out there. So, David, don't go anywhere. I'll come back to you after the outro. But for the rest of you out there, hey, guess what? It's Monday. And I know it's an important Monday, but we're not going there today. Have a great Monday. Enjoy it. We'll see you this Wednesday. And just know you still got 4.5 days to keep building it better. And make sure you thank all of these supporting members as well. What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you. And as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching.